Okay, hi everyone, welcome back to this live stream for Windows Server 2003. Just want to share my screen. Okay, group policy objects in Active Directory. GPOs are stored within Active Directory on all domain controllers in the system root sysvol folder by default. Within each folder, there's a policy called gpt.ini that contains information about the group policy. When GPOs are created within Active Directory, there is a specific order of inheritance, meaning how policies are applied with the hierarchical structure of Active Directory. When a user logs onto an Active Directory domain, depending on where GPOs have been applied within the hierarchical structure of Active Directory, the order of application is as follows: local computer policy, site group of domains, domain OU. If there are any conflicts between settings, the site policy overrides the local policy. Next, the domain policies are applied. If the domain policy has any additional settings, they will be applied to the configuration. If there are any conflicts in settings, the domain policy overrides the site policy. Next, the OU policies are applied. Again, any additional settings will be applied. If there are any conflicts in settings, the OU policy overrides the domain policy. Finally, if there are conflicts between computer and user policy settings, the user policy settings are applied. The following options are available for overriding the default behavior of application of GPOs. No override. The no override option is used to specify that child containers can't override the policy settings of higher level GPOs. In this case, the order of precedence would be that site settings override domain settings and the domain settings override OU settings. Assuming that no override is set at both levels, you would use the no override option if you wanted to set corporate-wide policies without allowing administrators of the lower level containers to override your settings. This option can be set on a per container basis as needed. Block inheritance. The block inheritance option is used to allow the child container to block GPO inheritance from parent containers. You would use this option if you did not want child containers to inherit GPO settings from parent containers and only wanted the GPO you had set for the container to be applied. If there is a conflict between the no override and block inheritance settings, no override options will be applied. So how policies are applied to different network clients. If your network consists of only Windows Server 2003 and 2000 server computers, you can use GPOs to manage your computer's configuration settings. Backward compatibility for NT4 is maintained in Windows Server 2003. If you want to manage configuration settings for NT4 users within the domain, you would use NT system policy files. These can be configured from the pole edit command, which calls the system policy editor utility. By default, the following administrative templates, which are used to apply group policy settings to the registry, are used by Windows Server 2003: system.adm, interest.adm, winnt.adm, windows.adm, common.adm, table 3.2 administrative templates, system.adm, template used by Windows 2000 and higher clients, interest.adm, template used to set Internet Explorer IE settings for Windows 2000 and higher clients, winnt.adm, user interface options used by Windows NT clients to configure options for Windows NT clients. Use the system policy editor poledit.exe. Windows ADM, user interface options used by Windows 95, 98 clients to configure options for Windows 95, 98 clients use the system policy editor poledit.exe, common.adm user interface options that are common on both Windows NT 4 and Windows 95, 98 clients. Administering local computer policy. You can manage local computer policies by adding the group policy snap-in to the MMC. Once you have added the snap-in, you will see an option called local computer policy. When you expand the local computer policy snap-in, you will see computer configuration as shown in figure 3.1. There are many options here that can be configured for local computer policies. The options that can be set are shown in figure 3.1. The most common options that you would configure for local computer policy are defined in the following sections. You may want to refer back to this image to better understand where in the hierarchical particular policy settings can be found. To conduct your policy management tasks, you can add the local computer policy snap-in to the Microsoft Management Console MMC. On a domain controller, you can access the domain policies by selecting Start Administrative Tools, Domain Security Policy. So creating a management console for security settings. 1. Select Start. Run type MMC in the Run dialog box and click the OK button to open the MMC. 2. From the main menu, select File, Add, Remove, Snap-in. 3. In the Add, Remove, Snap-in dialog box, click the Add button. 4. Select the Group Policy Object Editor option and click the Add button. 5. The Group Policy Object specifies local computer by default, click the Finish button. 6. Select the Event Viewer option and click the Add button. 7. The Select Computer dialog box appears with local computer selected by default. Click the Finish button, then click the Close button. In the Add, Remove, Snap-in dialog box, click the OK button. Select File, Save As. Save the console as security in the Drive Documents and Settings, All Users, Start Menu, Programs, Administrative Tools folder, and click the Save button. You can now access this console by selecting Start, Administrative Tools, Security. Configuring security settings. You configure security settings through Computer Configuration, Windows Settings, Security Settings. There are 3 main options that can be configured for Windows Settings: Account Policies, Local Policies, Public Key Policies. So using account policies are used to specify the user account properties that relate to the logon process. They allow you to configure computer security settings for password, account lockout specifications, and Kerberos authentication within a domain. After you have loaded the MMC snap-in for group policy, you will see an option for local computer policy. To access the account policies subfolders, expand local computer policy, computer configuration, Windows settings, security settings, and account policies. If you are on a Windows Server 2003 member server, you will see 2 folders: password policy and account lockout policy. If you are on a Windows Server 2003 computer that is configured as a domain controller, you will see 3 folders: password policy, account lockout policy, and Kerberos policy. The account policies available for member servers and domain controllers are described in the following sections. Setting password policies. Password policies ensure that security requirements are enforced on the computer. It is important to note that the password policy is set on a per computer basis. It cannot be configured for specific users. The password policies are defined on Windows Server 2003. Member servers are described in Table 3.3. On Windows Server 2003 domain controllers, all of these policies are configured as not defined. So Table 3.3 password policy options. Enforce password history, keeps track of users' password history remembers 3 passwords, same as default. Remember 24 passwords. Maximum password age determines maximum number of days a user can keep valid password. Key password for 42 days, key password for 1 day, key password for 999 days. Minimum password age specifies how long password must be kept before it can be changed. 0 days. Password can be changed immediately, same as default. 999 days. Minimum password length specifies minimum number of characters. Password must contain 0 characters, no password required, same as default. 14 characters. Password must meet complexity requirements. Allows you to install password filter. Disabled, same as default. Enabled. Store password using reversible encryption for all users in the domain. Specifies higher level of encryption for stored user passwords. Disabled, same as default. Enabled. The password policies are used as follows. The enforce password history option is used so that users cannot reuse the same password. Users must create a new password when their password expires or is changed. The maximum password age option is used so that after the maximum number of days has passed, users are forced to change their password. The minimum password age option is used to prevent users from changing their password several times in rapid succession in order to defeat the purpose of the enforced password history policy. The minimum password length option is used to ensure that users create a password as well as to specify that it meets the length requirement. If this option isn't set, users are not required to create a password at all. The password must meet complexity option is used to prevent users from using items found in a dictionary of common names as passwords. The store password using reversible encryption for all users in the domain option is used to provide a higher level of security for user passwords. In exercise 3.2, you will configure password policies for your computer. It is assumed that for this exercise, remaining exercise in this chapter, you have completed exercise 3.1 to create the security management console. So setting password policies. 1. Select Start, Administrative Tools, Security, and expand the local computer policy snap-in. 2. Expand the folders as follows. Computer configuration, Windows settings, security settings, account policies, password policy. 3. Open the enforce password history policy in the effective policy setting field. Specify 5 passwords. Remember to click the OK button. 4. Open the maximum password age policy in the local policy setting field. Specify that the password expires in 60 days. Click the OK button. 5. Select Start Command Prompt. At the command prompt, type GP update and press Enter. 6. At the command prompt, type Exit and press Enter. Setting account lockout policies. The account lockout policies are used to specify how many invalid logon attempts should be permitted. You can configure the account lockout policy so that after X number of unsuccessful login attempts within Y number of minutes, the account will be locked for a specified amount of time or until the administrator unlocks it. The account lockout policies are described in Table 3.4. So account lockout threshold specifies the number of invalid attempts allowed before account is locked out. 0. Disabled account will not be locked out. Same as default, 999 attempts, 5 attempts. Account lockout duration specifies how long account will remain locked if account lockout threshold is exceeded. 0. But if account lockout threshold is enabled, 30 minutes, same as default. 999 minutes, 5 minutes. Reset account lockout counter after specifies how long counter will remember unsuccessful login attempts. 0. But if account lockout threshold is enabled, 5 minutes, same as default. 999 minutes, 5 minutes. In this exercise, you will configure account lockout policies to test their effects. It is assumed that for this and the remaining exercises for configuring policies, you have access to at least 2 user accounts other than administrator that can be deleted if they become corrupted. So setting account lockout policies. 1. Select Start Administrative Tools, Security and expand local computer policy snap-in. 2. Expand folders as follows: computer configuration, Windows settings, security settings, account policy, account lockout policy. 3. Open the account lockout threshold policy. In the local policy setting field, specify that the account will log out after 3 invalid logon attempts. Click the OK button. 4. The suggested value changes dialog box appears. Accept the default values for account lockout duration and reset account lockout counter by clicking the OK button. 5. Log off as administrator. Try to log on as any user other than administrator with an incorrect password 3 times. After you see the error message stating that account lockout has been enabled, log on as administrator. 7. To unlock the user's account, open the local users and groups snap-in in the MMC. Expand the user folders and double-click the locked out user in the account tab of the properties dialog box. Click OK to remove the check from the account is locked out checkbox, then click OK. Setting Kerberos policies. The Kerberos policies are used to define Kerberos authentication settings. Kerberos version 5 is a security protocol that is used in Windows Server 2003 to authenticate users and network services. This is called dual verification or mutual authentication. When a Windows Server 2003 is installed as of the main controller, it automatically becomes a key distribution center, KDC. The KDC is responsible for holding all of the client passwords and account information. Kerberos services are also installed on each Windows Server 2003 client and server. The Kerberos authentication involves the following steps. 1. The client requests authentication from the KDC using a strong password or smart card. 2. The KDC issues a client ticket granting ticket, TGT. The client can use the TGT to access the ticket granting service, TGS, which allows the user to authenticate to services within the domain. The TGS issues service tickets to the clients. 3. The client presents the service ticket to the requested network service. This service ticket authenticates the user to the service and the service to the user for mutual authentication. The Kerberos policies are described in Table 3.5. So enforce user logon restrictions specifies that any logon restrictions will be enforced, not defined, enabled. Maximum lifetime for service ticket specifies the maximum age of a service ticket before it must be renewed, not defined, 600 minutes. Maximum lifetime for user ticket specifies the maximum age for a user ticket before it must be renewed, not defined, 10 hours. Maximum lifetime for a user ticket renewal specifies how long a ticket may be renewed before it must be regenerated, not defined, 7 days. Maximum tolerance for computer clock synchronization specifies the maximum clock synchronization between the client and the KDC, not defined, 5 minutes. Using local policies. As you learned in the previous section, account policies are used to control logon procedures. When you want to control what a user can do after logging on, you use local policies. With local policies, you can implement auditing, specify user rights, and set security options. To use local policies, first add the local computer policy snap into the MMC CXS 3.1. Then from the MMC, follow this path of folders to access the local policies folders. local computer policy, computer configuration, Windows settings, security settings, local policies. There are three folders in local policies: audit policy, user rights assignment, and security options. These policies are covered in the following sections. Setting audit policies. The audit policies are used to audit events that pertain to user management. By tracking certain events, you can create a history of specific tasks, such as user creation and unsuccessful logon attempts. You can also specify security violations that arise when users attempt to access system management tasks so that they do not have permission to access. When you define an audit policy, you can choose to audit success or failure to specific events. The success of an event means that the task was successfully accomplished. The failure of an event means that the task was not successfully accomplished. By default, auditing is not enabled and it must be manually configured. Once auditing has been configured, you can see the results of the audit through the Event Viewer utility. The audit policies are described in Table 3.6. Policy description: audit account logon events tracks when a user logs on, logs off, or makes a network connection. Audit account management tracks user and group account creation, deletion, and management actions. Audit directory service access tracks directory service access. Audit logon events: audit events related to a logon, such as running a logon script or accessing a roaming profile. Audit object access: audits access to files, folders, and printers. Audit policy change tracks any changes to the audit policy. Audit privilege use tracks each instance of a user exercising a user right. Audit process tracking tracks events such as activating a program, accessing an object, and exiting a process. Audit system events tracks system events such as shutting down or restarting the computer, as well as events that relate to the security log within Event Viewer. So in exercise 3.4, you will configure audit policies and view the results. Setting audit policies. 1. Select Start Administrative Tools Security and expand the local computer policy snap-in. 2. Expand the folders as follows: computer configuration, Windows settings, security settings, local policy, audit policy. 3. Open the audit account log on events policy. In the local policy setting field under audit these attempts, check the boxes for success and failure. Click the OK button. 4. Open the audit account management policy. In the local policy setting field under audit these attempts, check the boxes for success and failure. Click the OK button. 5. Log off as administrator and attempt to log on with an account name that does not exist. The login should fail because there is no account with that username. 6. Log on as administrator. Open the MMC and expand Event Viewer snap-in added in exercise 3.1. From Event Viewer, open the security log. You should see the audited events listed in this log. Assigning user rights. The user rights determine what rights a user or group has on the computer. User rights apply to the system. They are not the same as permissions, which apply to a specific object. An example of a user right is the backup files and directories right. This allows a user to back up files and folders even if the user does not have permission through the file system. The other user rights are similar in that they deal with system access as opposed to resource access. The user rights assignment policies are described in Table 3.7. Right description: access this computer from the network. Allows a user to access the computer from the network act as part of the operating system, allows low-level authentication services to authenticate any user, add workstations to domain, allows a user to create a computer account on the domain, adjust memory quotas for a process, allows a user to change the maximum memory that can be consumed by a process. Log on locally allows a user to interactively log on to this computer. This is required by logins initiated by pressing Ctrl-Alt-Delete sequence and may be required by some service or administrative applications that can log on as users. If you define this policy for a user or group, you must ensure that the administrator's group also has this right. Allow log on through terminal services. Allow a user to log on as terminal services client. Back up files and directories. Allows a user to back up files and directories regardless of how the file and directory permissions have been set. Bypass traverse checking. Allows a user to pass through and traverse the directory structure even if that user does not have permissions to list contents of the directory. Change the system time. Allows a user to change the internal time of the computer. Create a page file. Allows a user to create or change the size of a page file. Create a token object. Allows a process to create a token if the process uses the NT Create Token API. Create permanent shared objects. Allows a process to create directory objects through the Windows Server 2003 Object Manager. Debug programs. Allows a user to attach a debugging program to any process. Deny access to this computer from the network. Allows you to deny specific users or groups access to this computer from the network. Deny log on as a batch job. Prevents specific users or groups from logging on as a batch job. Deny log on as a service. Prevent specific users or groups from logging on as a service. Deny log on locally. Deny specific users or group access to the computer locally. Deny log on through terminal services. Prevent specific users or groups from logging on to the computer as a terminal services client. Enable computer and user accounts to be trusted for delegation. Allows a user or group to set the trusted for delegation setting for a user or computer object. Force shutdown from a remote system. Allows the system to be shut down by a user at a remote location on the network. Generate security audits. Allows a user, group, or process to make entries in the security log. Increase scheduling priority. Specifies that a process can increase or decrease the priority that is assigned to another process. Load and unload device drivers. Allows a user to dynamically unload and load plug-and-play device drivers. Lock pages in memory. This user right is no longer used in Windows Server 2003. It was originally intended to force data to be kept in physical memory and not allow the data to be paged to the page file. Log on as a batch job. Allows a process to log on to the system and run a file that contains one or more operating system commands. Log on as a service. Allows a service to log on in order to run the specific service. Manage auditing and security log. Allows a user to manage the security log. Modify firmware environment variables. Allows a user to process to modify the system environment variables. Perform volume maintenance tasks. Allows a user or group to run maintenance tasks, for instance, remote defragmentation on a volume. Be aware that this provides file system access and thus a security risk. Profile single process. Allows a user to monitor non-system processes through tools such as the performance logs and alert utility. profile system performance, allows a user to monitor system processes through tools such as the performance logs and alerts utility. Remove computer from docking station, allows a user to unlock a laptop through the Windows Server 2003 user interface. Write description, replace a process level token, allows a process to replace the default token that is created by the sub-process with the token that the process specifies. Restore files and directories, allows a user to restore files and directories regardless of file and directory permissions. Shut down the system, allows a user to shut down the local Windows Server 2003 computer. Synchronize directory service data, allow a user to synchronize data associated with a directory service. Take ownership of files or other objects, allows a user to take ownership of system objects. So setting local user rights. 1, select Start Administrative Tools Security and expand the local computer policy snap-in. 2, expand folders as follows: computer configuration, Windows settings, security settings, local policy, user rights assignment. 3, open the logon as a service user right. The local security policy setting dialog box appears. 4, click the Add User or Group button. The Select User or Groups dialog box appears. Enter a valid username, click the Add button, and then click OK. So I'm going to leave it here today for the video, or live stream, I should say. So thanks for spending the time with me, and have a nice evening.